Hello and welcome back. So I believe this time you guys are painting your portraits. So last time you had outlined your portrait with a marker, and then we scribbled on the back of that portrait, taped it down to a canvas, and then outlined it with a pen or some harder surface. It could be a pencil that didn't have to be sharp, or a pen. It doesn't have to work. The idea is just to apply that pressure so that after, when you pull it up, then it has transferred the image and you should be able to see. So although the lines are light, you are going to go ahead and use those lines so that you can paint your portrait today. So painting your portrait is going to be a little different than the other ones because those colors that you use are going to be more specific to you. For one, skin tones. Skin tones can be fun and exciting and also sometimes a little overwhelming when it comes to mixing the skin tone colors. So I'm going to give you guys a few tips for you to mix your skin tones. You are going to want to create just kind of a general flat skin tone color for your neck. I have a necklace on there so it cuts it off a little higher. Your face, you're going to go around your eyes, but for your nose and around your face. However, in order to maintain the shapes of both your nose and your chin, especially, we are going to use that skin tone color, darken it up just a little bit to add kind of a little blending lines along the edges of those features. So that's how we're going to make sure that they're still visible so that you've got your skin tones, but even though they're going to be more flat shapes or values, you are going to just use a slightly darker version of your skin tone to create those edge lines today. With creating the skin tones, you're also going to need to find colors that will match for your hair. So for example, I've got blondish brown hair, and so I have kind of a light yellow, a little bit more of a golden yellow, and some browns that I can kind of mix those three together. With paint and with skin tones, it's really tricky to get exact colors, so you're just going to kind of get the general color. If you have a darker brown and more dark brown and black hair, you can mix the two of those together for kind of a flat hair color. The nice thing about sometimes having a little variety is you can, so I could paint obviously more yellow, and then I can add lines or streaks of brown into it, as well as with this other yellow. So I'm getting more of a multi-dimensional look as I paint in just the variety of hair. So for hair colors, whatever colors work for you. Skin tones, you are going to want to use, if you can have some sort of peach colored base. A peach colored base, this one is a little bit pink. I tend to be kind of rosy. I burn really easily, so my undertones are more of a pinkish red. Also having white on hand as well as a tan or a brown. So usually the combination of these three can create most skin tones. If you tan really easily and you might have more of a yellowish undertone or a golden undertone, then what you would do is you would mix in a little bit of that yellow for kind of the undertone with maybe the peach a little bit, as well as the white and the brown. So it is going to be a little bit of an adventure as you get to mix the values for your own skin tones. So we're going to do skin tones, hair. If you've got just like a light peachy pink, that we usually work for lips. If you need to darken it up a little bit just so it offsets from the skin tone, then that works. A color for your clothes. So in this case, in my picture, I was just wearing a gray sweater. You don't have to paint your clothes the exact same color that you were wearing. So for example, if instead I wanted to paint that I had a blue shirt on, like I'm wearing today, and I just paint the shirt blue instead, that works as well. So honestly, you don't have to line it up exactly with your clothes that you're wearing in the photograph. Then you're also going to want to have some sort of background color. This one is my favorite color, which is just a kind of mint. This one is called Key West, but it's just a teal mint color. So that's what I'm going to paint for my background around myself today. So it is important to think about the color combinations that you want beforehand, as far as for your skin tones, your hair colors, and eye color as well. So if you have your blue eyes or brown eyes, whatever your eye color, but you are also going to need black paint for your pupils and for just around the iris color of your eyes as well. White paint would be great for the whites of your eyes. However, they may be small enough you may not need to worry about even painting those today. So keep those things in mind as you paint. So go ahead and you're going to want to get your paints ready, and then you will have your brushes, get a variety of brushes, your water bucket. We are actually going to start with the skin tones first, just to get those ones out of the way, since they are a little bit trickier. So grab the colors that you think would be best for your skin tone. One great thing about matching your skin tone is you can sometimes just paint it right on your arm. It's not going to be a perfect match, and that's okay, but just get something that you feel like more or less goes along with your actual skin tone. So go ahead and grab that stuff. I'm going to pause it here on my end and also get set up. Okay, so I do have my brush set. I've got a wide range of brush sizes. Just keep in mind you are going to want to switch brushes during even the same color, just so that you can work in your small detail or your larger detail. So the first thing we're going to do is paint your skin tones. I'm going to pick just a couple of small round brushes, so they are a little bit smaller than the other ones. So it's hard to, yeah. So these are my two smallest brushes. I do feel like I may use a slightly larger brush during part of the skin tones, but for the most part, I'm just going to stick to those smaller ones for my edges and my detail. For my skin tone, I am going to start with the peach and the brown, or the pink. This one is a little more pink than I typically go for. So I've just got some pink on my paper plate. Once again, I don't need a ton of paint because it's not a large surface area, but I do want to have enough mixed so that I have enough to paint that entire space. When I put my paint on, I will typically not put them one on top of each other, but just side by side, kind of like a Venn diagram, so I can mix in the middle and then get different ratios, so I can pull more pink or more brown, but it gives me a little just a little bit more options as I am mixing those colors together. So in this case, got a pretty good kind of brownish pink color going on. I'm going to test it on my skin. It's quite a bit lighter. It's a little rosy. I am going to actually mix in just a little bit. I'm going to mix in a little bit of white in that just to lighten up some of it. Kind of see what I feel like. So even though on my skin that paint is going to dry darker than it is when it's wet. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So you don't necessarily always want the color to match what you've got directly on your skin, because that will lighten up a little bit. It will darken as it dries. Okay, I just mixed in a little bit more of that tan brown and some white, and I am feeling pretty good about what I've got. So I've got the browns, more of the pinks, and off to this side I've got a pretty good mix between the two, and I feel like that's not too far off. I do like that a little bit better than the previous pinkish one. So it's got just a little more fleshy look to it. So I'm going to go ahead and start painting in just my skin tones. With that, I am going to leave just a little bit of space where that line is for the edge of my chin to my neck, just so I'm aware. I do have this necklace line, and actually you probably can't see, so let me readjust things so that you can see better. There we go. So I do have, this is supposed to be a necklace. I'm just going to paint right over that for now. I can guess where that necklace would go and paint it back in when I want it. But for right now, it's not as necessary. Just trying to get some of that extra paint off of the brush. A lot of that paint isn't necessarily on the tip of the brush where I'm using to paint, but it is further up, so I'm just going to scrape a little bit of paint off the brush and go ahead and work on my forehead shape. So this is where it starts to get a little trickier because I do have, for example, around my eyes and my eyebrows comes in a little different. Also got a line for my dimple. So right now I'm just kind of leaving that as where those different lines are within my skin tones. I'm just going to leave those as a little tiny white space so I can go back in later and know exactly where those are at to paint them. One mistake I did make in painting the neck first is that I then put my hand right into it. So if you think about that, I would recommend maybe starting a little higher up or letting that neck portion dry a little bit before going on. We talked about last time in relation to the teeth. If you have a picture with your mouth smiling open, that you don't want to outline the individual shapes of your teeth, but you can go around the entire work of your. So we're just leaving little white spaces where those lines would be later, so that I can remember where they are. And painting in their shapes. If I want, and I'm feeling adventurous, and I want a little bit more variety in my skin tones, I could also have a little bit of white paint that I'm kind of mixing in as the paint's still wet as well, which would just give a little bit more variation as far as the range of lights to darks. So right now it's looking pretty silly because I've got my face and all these little white spaces in between and around. But that's okay. It's just going to look a little silly for a little bit. I'm just going to do the best I can in getting those spaces filled in. I'm actually going to rotate the canvas so I've got access to this other side a little better. Okay, so even though it does look kind of silly right now, I am feeling pretty good about having gone in there and gotten those shapes. You may feel like you need a second layer, and that's fine too. And then I'm going to go in, I may back this up just a little bit. So I've got a couple of different options. I can either add in for around those edges more of that pinkish, or I could add more of the tan to darken it. So the idea is just to create a color variation from the flat color that I already have there. So in this case, I'm going to add in just a little bit more of that pink. So this version is going to be a little more pinkish. And then where that is, I'm just going to kind of paint those edge lines. And that did not. It's a little bit lighter. I mean, it's blending in really well with it, but you can't see as much variation as I was hoping for on that. So I may actually go in and darken it up. So this time I'm using the brown, mixing it into that flat skin tone on the other side. But I need it distinct enough that I can see those lines if I paint them. There, that's a little better. I feel like those lines are a little too distinct while they are still wet. I can just use that lighter color and kind of blend them out a little bit on either side. But I've still got the shape of my nose, but it may not be as outliney-ish. So I can just kind of blend in some of that other color into those shapes. I realize I missed some space just underneath my nose before my lips, so I'm going to paint that in with the other color. And then I can use that color as well to do any touch-ups. So keep in mind, typically we don't water down the paint very much because we want it to cover the canvas, but if you need to water down, get your brush nice and wet and then dry it off a little bit, mix it with some of those colors, then it works more as a glaze. So then you can adjust the skin tones, whether it's with the browns or the others. So I'm just doing kind of a glaze over some of those lines that may be a little too distinct for my taste. So I can still, for more or less, see the edges of them. And down here on my chin. So they may look out of place right now, but the more we paint in the other features and the other shapes, the more they will start to blend together and not feel so out of place. So with the skin tones, you're going to go ahead and kind of paint in the shapes the best you can. And you're going to rinse out your brushes and dry them off really well. And we're actually going to go into, I'm going to paint the background next on mine. So we'll do background next. That leaves space around the skin tones to dry because of the shape of the hair that goes around skin tones. So in this case, if you need a larger brush, I'm going to use just a big flat larger brush so I can do more coverage at a time. I am doing this really bright teal green. This larger brush is really great for coverage. Because I have the canvas frame, I do need to also paint the outside edges. And then around the shapes of my hair, it doesn't have to be perfect, it is kind of more wispy, and even if it doesn't match the photograph perfectly, then that is okay too. So I'm just rotating so I can get the sides of the canvas. The best that I can. And some good coverage there. So ends of hair can be kind of tricky because they are a little kind of pointed, so sometimes using one of these brushes just at an upright angle, and it gets me some little shapes inside and kind of in between the end of the hair. I'm going to flip it one last time so I can paint the background on this other side.
When are you going to start painting that? Sarah,
Max,
when are you going to start painting the map?
just a second.
Huh?
Okay, so we're going to finish up this last little section. And then we will just let those skin tones and background dry for a little bit before we go into the hair and the other features. So even though the skin tones do seem out of place, and I know you guys are probably thinking that right now, that they look a little funny, that is pretty normal and natural. Painting skin tones is pretty tricky, but they'll start to blend more once you get the color of your hair and your eyes and your mouth and other things. So go ahead and just let that dry as needed, and then we'll pick back up in a few more minutes.